Many people are excited about what wonders the modern world might bring, but many are also scared. And this season, audiences are treated, for the first time, to perhaps the scariest outcome of technological progress: the robot apocalypse. This is Between Two Wars Season 2, a chronological summary of the interwar years, where we cover the zeitgeist, the culture, the technology, the art, the sports, and much more in the era when, for better or worse, humanity ushered in modern times. I'm Indy Neidell, and here are the headlines. British diplomats have their hands full dealing with the ever-escalating guerrilla war in Ireland, supporting a coup in Persia, and much more throughout the empire. Meanwhile, the Bolsheviks face their biggest crisis yet with the Kronstadt rebellion. Coming at a time of widespread discontent with the harsh costs of war, the left-wing uprising seriously threatens Bolshevik rule, but is crushed with overwhelming force. It is the last major threat to Soviet Russia from within its own borders. War also continues throughout the lands of the former Russian Empire. Still, peace is at least officially agreed upon by Poland and Soviet Russia at the Treaty of Riga. And the Poles signed yet another treaty this season, this time a military agreement with France to provide assistance to one another in the event of an unprovoked attack. It will be central to French foreign policy throughout the coming decades. It will be central to global diplomacy as a whole, providing a foundation for the alliance that will, spoiler, fight the next world war. Now, so far in this series, I have mainly spoken about the positive things people hope the modern age will bring. And electricity, radio, aviation, and more all do offer a very bright future. But an industrialized society can also go very wrong. And in January this year, Czechoslovak audiences watch a play about just that. It's Karel Čapek's Rossum's Universal Robots, and is the story of a robot uprising. It is actually the introduction of the word robot, deriving from the Czech robota, a word denoting forced or toiling labor. Set on the island factory of Rossum's Universal Robots, the premise is that a chemical means of replicating humans has been discovered and used to mass-produce soulless robots who manufacture everything humanity needs and wants, removing any need for work. But the audience learns in Act 1 that overproduction has resulted in economic chaos and triggered revolutionary action from idle humans. The robots are sent to quell these disturbances and are then used against one another in a new world war. But they soon develop a sense of consciousness, and they realize they are serving inferior masters. They band together, declaring in a new manifesto, "Robots of the world, we, the first union of Rossum's Universal Robots, declare man our enemy, an outcast in the universe. Robots of the world, you are ordered to exterminate the human race. Do not spare the men, do not spare the women. Preserve only the factories, railroads, machines, mines, and raw materials. Destroy everything else. Then return to work. Work must not cease." By Act 2, the robots have revolted against their masters, slaughtered most of humanity, and besieged the island factory that created them. Once they gain entry, they kill everyone inside, save one person, an architect who works with his hands like the robots. The play's epilogue reveals that the robots have learned to reproduce and have formed a government. And the suggestion is that the cycle of humanity might start all over again. Interestingly, although most of us probably imagine mechanical parts and wirings when we hear the word robot, this is not what Čapek intended. His concept of chemically reproduced organisms is more similar to what people in the 21st century will associate with androids or replicants or synths, in that they are almost exactly like humans but engineered to be soulless. Later in the decade, when the play premieres in other parts of the world, the actors playing the robots will be dressed in mechanical costumes, which actually dilutes a lot of Čapek's point. His critique isn't just of modern technology, and his robots aren't simply machines carrying out automated tasks. Instead, he's writing about modern society as a whole, and specifically, the scientific management of labor that has risen with industrialization. In his opinion, this leads to exploitation. human illness, and potential economic collapse. So it's not very surprising that he'll be pretty displeased at this misinterpretation. Čapek will even go so far as writing a newspaper article in 1935 where he rejects all responsibility for the idea that metal contraptions could ever replace human beings, and that by means of wires they could awaken something like life, love, or rebellion. The author cannot be blamed for what might be called the worldwide humbug over the robots. But you can't really blame people for being obsessed with technology, especially when it offers so much. A few episodes ago, I mentioned an American radio station called KDKA in Pittsburgh that challenges the claim of 8MK in Detroit as the world's first radio station. Well, first station or not, they are making a pretty big national impact. It began broadcasting on the night of the presidential elections last November and has been broadcasting every day. Many stations are doing a similar thing, but what makes KDKA unique is that it markets its appeal as a true mass medium. Despite having a growing number of fans, other stations like 8MK in Detroit mainly sell their appeal to radio enthusiasts. Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company, the company which owns KDKA, on the other hand, makes real efforts to reach the public, providing receivers and loudspeakers to local companies to host listening parties for employees on election night. In January, KDKA also marks some important broadcasting milestones, offering one of the first remote broadcasts from the Pittsburgh Calvary Episcopalian Church and the first public address from a politician when Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover speaks from a country club on the state of American relief to war-ravaged Europe. KDKA operators also make some pioneering steps with studio recording itself. Radio engineers have found that whenever a musician is recorded in a hall, the sensitive microphone picks up all the echoes bouncing off the walls. So they move recording to outdoors, building a huge tent on the roof of the radio building. This works great until the tent blows away in a storm. So they put up a new tent indoors, which deadens the echoes, thus creating modern studio design. Monk's cloth is often used on walls to absorb sound. That is a fancy name for burlap. Radio is constantly evolving. As is film. The movie The Kid, written and directed by Charlie Chaplin and starring him as his famous tramp character, is released in the US on January 21st. It also stars Jackie Coogan, who will decades later be Uncle Fester on The Addams Family as Chaplin's adopted son and sidekick. It is Chaplin's first full-length film as director, and it is a huge hit. However, it will only be the second highest grossing film of the year. The highest grossing is likewise released this winter on March 6th. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse is an epic film based on the Spanish novel of the same name. It is likely one of the first real anti-war films, featuring scenes of the devastated French countryside during the World War and personal tales of loss. It has a huge cultural impact and turns an unknown actor named Rudolph Valentino into a global superstar. It also launches a tango craze and a fashion for gaucho pants. Beginning in Argentina, it is a tale of romance and tango, where one half of an extended family moves to France and the other to Germany. Lead man Julio, played by Valentino, settles in Paris and falls in love with Marguerite Lallier, the young wife by arranged marriage to E.10, a friend of Julio's father's. When their affair is discovered, Etienne agrees to divorce to avoid scandal, and Julio and Marguerite hope to marry. But then the Great War breaks out. Etienne is blinded. Julio's father's castle is overrun by the Germans, and then by a French counterattack, and Julio becomes renowned for his bravery over 4 years of fighting. However, he and his last German cousin die together in no man's land, just as they reunite, killed by an artillery shell. The film ends at Julio's grave, while his father is mourning him. A man approaches the father, likely representing God, and declares, while holding his hands up, that he knows every son buried here. The man then points to the sky, and we see the four horsemen of the apocalypse riding away into the heavens. The man closes the film with the words, "Peace has come, but the four horsemen will still ravage humanity, stirring unrest in the world until all hatred is dead and only love reigns in the heart of mankind." Humanity might be a long way off from universal love. But there is some promise of unity this season. Between March 24th and 31st, the first international women's sporting event, the Women's Olympiad, is held in Monte Carlo at the International Sporting Club. It is organized by Alice Milliat, who had asked the International Athletic Association to include women's track and field events in the future 1924 Olympics. They refused, so she simply formed her own federation and started her own Olympics. There are several running events: high jump, long jump, javelin, and shot put. All of the gold medals go to athletes from France or Great Britain. The tournament is a big success, and another one is planned for next year. And to round off this episode, here are some strange debut performances. An interview of Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last emperor of Germany and king of Prussia, is published worldwide by United Press. It is his first interview since his abdication in November 1918. And he pulls no punches, saying the German people have betrayed themselves, God, and him, likely thinking that the final betrayal is the most sinful of the three. Another strange debut this season is given by English magician P.T. Selbit and his new trick of sawing a woman in half, which he does at a London theater. A final, even more gruesome performance is given by the American Dr. Evan O'Neill Kane, who, to prove that an appendectomy can be done using only local anesthetic, performs one on himself to an audience of likely horrified witnesses. And later in life, at the age of 70, he will also repair his own hernia, a pretty dangerous task because it risks puncturing a major artery. That's a brave man. And those were the first months of 1921. Though fantastic and so stereotypically sci-fi that it seems unbelievable, Karel Čapek's story about modernity itself bringing an end to humanity isn't all that unfounded. Only recently did the world witness what horrors industrial societies could launch at one another during the Great War. The modern age of science, technology, mass culture, and more all promises a great deal, but it also brings dangers never before seen. That's something that will only become more and more clear as the years roll on. We did a whole episode on pilots like Amelia Earhart and their daredevil stunts in our first season of Between Two Wars. So if you'd like to find out more about that, then you can click right here any minute now. Our Time Ghost Army Member of the Week is Sam Haley. It is our Time Ghost Army that makes everything we do possible. So to be part of the effort, join up at patreon.com or at timeghost.tv. I will end this episode with something from the world of robots. Okay? This is a poem. It's How I Hate the Night, also known as Marvin's Lullaby, which is a short, dolorous ditty of no tone or indeed tune. Now the world has gone to bed. Darkness won't engulf my head. I can see by infrared how I hate the night. Now I lay me down to sleep, try to count electric sheep. Sweet dream wishes you can keep. How I hate the night. Okay, that was oil, and I held my face that straight for that long, okay? That was pretty good. That is absolutely disgusting. If you've never drunk... Okay, we're not going to show it. If you've never had oil with ice cubes into it, so you don't know what you're missing.